Good evening, everybody. We return to the regular meeting of the board after a short recess, and I rise and report on items dealt with in committee of the whole closed session. The item pertained to collective agreement with QP Local 2544, and that agreement has been approved. Please rise for our acknowledgement and national anthem.
The land upon which we work, live, and sustain ourselves is the ancestral and treaty lands of the Michizagig Anishinaabe, also known today as the Mississaugas of the Credit, the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land. We also recognize the rich pre-contact history and relationships which include the Anishinaabe and the Ongwe Hongwe.
Since European contact, this land continues to be home to Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. As responsible community members, we value the diversity, dignity, and worth of all people.
Colonialism displaced and dispossessed Indigenous peoples of their ancestral land
and continues to deny their basic human rights, dignities, and freedoms.
We are committed to learning true history to reconcile, make reparations, and fulfill our treaty obligations to the original peoples and our collective responsibilities to the lands, water, animals, and each other for future generations.
Once again this evening, we ask for your patience as we implement a hybrid model with some trustees present in person and others present virtually. Item number 5, the approval of the agenda. There's one addition to the agenda, item 11.1, Ontario Active Schools Travel Report from Trustee McDonald. I approve the amended agenda for this evening. I have no conflict to declare. Item 7.1, Indigenous Education Month in November. November is Indigenous Education Month. First Nations, Inuit, and Métis are the first peoples of what we now call Canada. Their presence has been here since time immemorial. Indigenous Education Month is an opportunity for Peel District School Board students, their families and staff to continue to engage their treaty relationships by reflecting on the long-standing commitments between the many different Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island and Canadians throughout history. 7.2 is Hindu Heritage Month in November. Ontario is home to a large and vibrant Hindu community. In December 2017, the Ontario Legislative Assembly declared November as Hindu Heritage Month to recognize the many positive contributions of Hindus residing in Ontario. Since the first Hindu immigrants arrived in Canada at the beginning of the 20th century, Hindu Canadians from across Ontario have made significant contributions across all fields: science, education, medicine, law, politics, business, culture, and sports. Hindu Heritage Month was adopted officially by the Peel District School Board in April of 2019. The declaration offers the opportunity for Peel District School Board students, their families, and staff to increase their awareness of Hindu culture and heritage within and beyond Canada. Heritage Month is an opportunity to remember, celebrate, and educate future generations about Hindu Canadians and the important role that they have played and continue to play in communities across Ontario. Our publicly stated commitments to anti-racism and anti-oppression ensure that this occurs through engaging, equitable, and inclusive online and in-person learning modalities and through culturally relevant program opportunities. In celebration of Hindu Heritage Month, we continue to center students' lived experience as well as amplify the community's definition of flourishing. Item 7.3, Peel Custodial and Maintenance Workers Day, November 25th, 2022. For Peel Custodial and Maintenance Workers Day, we join students, colleagues, and PDSB families in sharing our appreciation for all that you do to ensure that Peel schools continue to shine. Your care and dedication do not go unnoticed. Thank you for keeping learning environments safe, clean, and beautiful, which plays a big role in student well-being and achievement. And while we recognize both days during the September board meeting, I wanted to remind everyone that today happens to be Bus Driver Appreciation Day, while Peel Teaching Assistant and Early Childhood Educators Appreciation Day falls on Friday, October 21st. Thank you all once again for your work to ensure student safety to and from school and that students feel supported as they develop knowledge, skills, and confidence. Item 8.1, retirements. I would like to acknowledge all our retirees and thank them for their many years of dedicated service to the Peel District School Board. We wish you every success in your future endeavors. This month's retirees are Nancy Banks, Loris Bousdon, James Cash, Xiaoping Chen, Barbara Dodwell, Shirley Drummond, Andrew Earl, Barb Elder, Karen Lapierre, Lynn McGee, Catherine McClure, Dan Ramo, Tama Rumatali, Pixie Schmitz, Delia Vincent, Stephen Vincent, and Lynn Walter. Item number 9, the board chair's announcements. As this is the last board meeting of this term of office, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the trustees for their service over the past term. The term has not been without its challenges. However, despite the challenges, good work has been done. You have been part of the system to bring about change through initiatives, programming, accomplishments, measures which lead to action, hard work, and dedication. Part of the system to inspire success, confidence, and hope. A school board trustee has impact on the education system, but also on so many aspects of the community. It is through vision, sincerity, respect, accountability, and effort that impact is positive. To those that have served so diligently, purposefully, and progressively in this term, and for many of you for multiple terms, we all express our sincere gratitude. We thank you for all of your significant contributions to student learning and well-being. Your collective daily efforts make a positive difference in the lives of our students, their families, and the world. On behalf of myself and the entire board, thank you for your service, and we wish you well in your future endeavors. I think at least we need to applaud, right? Item 10, report from student trustees. There are no reports from our student trustees this evening. Item 11, 11.1, Peace Arts Ontario Active School Travel Report, Trustee McDonald.
Thank you, through your chair. I'm really excited about this report. We had a meeting yesterday, and it was very timely. So I'm happy to share that the investigation of supportive policy for active school travel has been out, and it's an evidence-based recommendation for policies to promote active transportation for school journeys. And I'm just going to summarize what this report is about. The active school travel, or often referred to as AST, is defined as any mode of human-powered transportation to and from school. Studies show that school-aged children's engagement in AST is correlated with higher daily levels of physical activity, improved fitness levels, improved academic performance, brain development, and connections with nature and peers. Additionally, studies also show that an increased use of AST can decrease children's exposure to air pollution and thus risk of adverse health outcomes from pollutants. Engagement in AST is influenced by social and environmental factors of both students and parents, including demographics, neighborhood characteristics, and perceived safety. Environmental factors, such as the way streets are laid out, the increased density of residents, and the mixed use of land in a neighborhood, encourage children's participation in AST. School travel is intricately tied to geography, student transportation policy, municipal planning, and other factors determined by environmental policies. This report aims to map policies and procedures that affect family and student choice of transportation modes when traveling to and from school, as well as identifying evidence-based recommendations for policies supporting AST in Ontario. And this study was a multi-method strategy. It included a comprehensive literature review of over 185 academic journal articles, environmental policy scans of 24 regions in Ontario, and 55 key informant surveys and interviews. And the report underlines the critical role policies and procedures play in supporting and promoting the use of active travel modes by Ontario students. The research findings presented on the 5 key topics, so planning, infrastructure, school site, school transportation, and school travel planning, signify the myriad of policy factors that influence AST engagement. This report will serve as a guidance document that will inform Ontario municipalities, school boards, and student transportation consortia in the development of policies that support and promote active transportation for school journeys. Each policy recommendation and its primary authority, provincial, municipal, or school board, can be found in the appendix of the report. And the report is available online. I will forward the link to the board reporter so all the trustee colleagues can get it, as well as you can check out the website, like Green Communities Canada was involved in it. Also, Ontario Active School Travel Council, and on their website is Ontario Active School Travel.ca. So this is great news, as I have been working diligently with the PSART committee to try and increase active travel to school. And I think this report lays a great foundation, for future developments. So that's all I have to report today, Supervisor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Trustee McDonald, and thanks for the report. Sounds like it's pretty robust and it would be a good read. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 12, Director's Leadership Report, Director Swaroop.
Thank you, Supervisor Rodriguez. Good evening, trustees, staff, and community members. I'd like to begin by sharing that on September 29th, students and staff at Jean Augustine Secondary School celebrated the 85th birthday of their school's namesake with a tribute fitting her significant contributions as an educator, activist, and change maker in Canada. The birthday celebration was organized and hosted by the students and attended by members of the school community. The event included dance performances, tributes, well wishes, and featured students interviewing the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine about her life and career achievements. It followed a day of fun-filled activities that raised money for the Jean Augustine Center for Young Women's Empowerment, an organization dedicated to empowering young women and girls by offering a broad range of programming in academics, STEM, arts, health, life skills, mentorship, and peer relations. The celebration precedes a soon-to-be-released documentary about Jean Augustine's life and legacy entitled Steadfast, The Messenger and the Message. The school honors Jean Augustine in their mission to provide secondary students opportunities for service, activism, innovation, and leadership, with Dr. Augustine as a shining example of what is possible for students as they prepare for the future. Next, I'd like to share about the Louise Arbor Secondary School alumni event. Principals and vice principals in the Harold Brathwaite, Louise Arbor, and Judith Nyman family of schools had the opportunity to participate in a panel discussion facilitated by Vice Principal Valda Keldo McDonald. The panel featured alumni from Louise Arbor Secondary School who participated in the then newly formed Boys Club, created to provide a sense of belonging and to support racialized students in their journey towards post-secondary pathways. The alumni offered advice to the educators on how to best support students in secondary schools based on the experiences that they had while attending high school. They encouraged administrators to provide students with lots of positive reinforcement and a positive environment, both necessary components to assist students in succeeding. They also emphasized the importance of building relationships with students as a foundation for success and encouraged peer leaders to be innovative and unafraid to try new ideas to help students engage in academic life. The former students, now working in the financial, youth sports, and life science sectors, have all made successful transitions into post-secondary pathways and continue to strive for success based on the foundational lessons that they learned in their secondary school journeys. They reminded educators that they must, and I quote, look beyond what you see and truly believe in your students. Their inspirational discussion made a strong impact on those in attendance, and we are proud of their achievements and motivation to succeed. And this week, Peel District School Board hosted an international delegation from the Netherlands comprising of 54 secondary school staff, including directors, superintendents, principals, and teachers. You see some of their comments and school pictures on the slides following their school visits. Their objective was to learn about the innovative work we are doing to personalize learning, empower student ownership, and to build inclusive and equitable learning environments that contribute to student achievement and well-being. The delegates' visit included a system presentation on Peel District School Board by senior staff. This was followed by a visit to 9 Peel District School Board secondary schools in Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon yesterday. Our guests were thrilled with the meaningful, insightful conversations, professional dialogue, the learning and inclusive environments that they experienced at each school. They were most impressed by the student ambassadors and the leadership that they exuded through their presentations and the ways they responded to their inquiries. Next, I will highlight the work on the ministry directives, which continues to be foundational to ensuring equitable outcomes for all Peel students with a focus on Black and Indigenous students and communities. Tonight, we will be reporting specifically on Directive 17, which outlines plan for the guidance system review, and Directive 21, which realigns our approach to student discipline. The work to address Directive 21 aligns the revision of Policy 48. This policy includes accountability measures to secure the removal of social, identity-based disparities and disproportionalities in the student disciplinary process, with the inclusion of collaboration with families and consultation with the superintendent before making final decisions about suspensions or recommending expulsions. This work will transform the way that the discipline process is enacted in our schools with a focus on procedural fairness. We know that the directives work is making a difference, and we are going beyond the directives. And I see it in my visits to schools. During my visits to schools this week, I was impressed by the students' engagement in authentic learning experiences that highlighted student voice, agency, and empowerment in the learning process. At Millers Grove Public School, there's a focus on social justice school-wide. Students are guided in learning about issues of fairness in our world and discuss how these are manifested in society. Student voice and agency are offered to students through their participation in a student council and the school council, where they can give input about their school, which informs the decision-making and helps to ensure students see themselves in their school environment and in their learning. And at Lisgar Public School, the students are participating in a municipal student vote. They have set up a polling station and have engaged in a process that simulates what it is like to vote in an election. Before casting their votes, students have individually researched all the candidates and have seen whose agenda resonates with them. They were excited to share with me the importance of organizing a mock election in order to prepare for the future. This experience is sure to motivate students to participate in this democratic exercise when they're actually old enough to vote. And as they said to me, and I quote them, "We are the future of our country." In March 2022, the Human Rights Office launched a student survey on discriminatory language in learning environments to better understand the impact of discriminatory statements on students' learning experience. Over 35,000 students in grades 6 to 12 lent their perspectives and responded to the survey. The Human Rights Office has been working alongside the board's research department to develop a data analysis and accompanying board recommendations. The Human Rights Office is finalizing the data analysis and will be sharing the findings, analysis, and its recommendations with senior leadership. The findings will also be published on the Student Voice page on the Discriminatory Statements Response portal this month for all staff to review. The findings from this survey, as well as the Human Rights Office's recommendations, will guide our staff to center student experience and voice in our approach to forming learning environments free from discrimination. Looking ahead, as Remembrance Day approaches, we acknowledge the contributions of all Canadian soldiers who fought for freedom. November 8th marks Indigenous Veterans Day, a day to commemorate the contributions of Indigenous veterans in the First and Second World Wars, as well as their continued service at home and overseas. And on November 11th, schools and workplaces will mark Remembrance Day with special assemblies and events. Resources will also be provided for educators to facilitate learning. And to all trustees, today I would like to acknowledge and appreciate your years of service, working collaboratively to serve the students and families in Peel District School Board. I thank you for your support and ongoing advocacy for the constituents you serve. And that concludes my remarks for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Swaroop. There are no items on the consent agenda. Item 14, approval of the minutes. I approve the minutes of the board meeting of September 28th, 2022. And moving on to item 16, staff reports, ministry directives, 16.1, ministry directives, directive 9, the annual equity accountability report card, Director Swaroop.
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I will now ask Associate Director Paul De Silva to present Directive 9.
Thank you, Director Swaroop, and through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Superintendent Bernadette Smith, who is the Superintendent for Innovation and Research.
Thank you, Associate Director De Silva and Director Swaroop, and through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. Following the release of the Ministry of Education review of the Peel District School Board in March 2020, the PDSB has been undertaking system transformation to ensure that the well-documented and historical inequities in student achievement and experiences are eliminated. In Ontario, our education system is a colonial structure that was constructed to favor whiteness and white Eurocentric norms. As a result, systemic discrimination creates unequal and disparate learning outcomes for students based on their identities. The PDSB's mission statement asserts, "We inspire success, confidence, and hope in each student. In order to do this, we must identify, confront, and disrupt the systemic inequities that persist today for students with particular identities and intersectional identities, most notably those who identify as Indigenous and African, Black, and Afro-Caribbean." One of the key themes evident in the directives is the importance of monitoring, transparency, and accountability. Directive 9 specifically instructs the board to develop and implement a comprehensive annual equity accountability report card. This is intended to inform the board's efforts to create deep structural and cultural changes that infuse the core values of equity, inclusion, and human rights into everyday practices, programs, and policies. The report card is intended to assess and measure the implementation of the directives that specifically address student outcomes. I will now ask Lynn Hollingshead, Manager of the Research and Accountability Team, to provide an update on the annual Equity Accountability Report Card. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Superintendent Smith, Associate Director De Silva, and Director Swaroop. And through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. This evening, I would like to present to you the second annual Equity Accountability Report Card, looking at trends over time from 2018-19 to 2021-22 of equity gaps in student outcomes. As described by Superintendent Smith, its purpose, as per the Anti-Racism Directorate data standards, is to provide insights into the disproportionate experiences of Peel District School Board students over the last 4 years. The report card organizes the outcome indicators according to PDSB's 4 board improvement and equity planning focus areas. Student achievement, including credit accumulation in grade 9 and 10 literacy and numeracy. Outcomes from last year's EQAO administration are not yet available, and we expect to include these measures in next year's report. Under human rights and equity, we provide outcomes related to student discipline. Within mental health and well-being, at this time, the centrally available data related to this area is persistent absences. Additional topics will be added to future iterations of this report. And finally, within pathways and transitions, we have 4 areas of focus: special education designations, academic and university pathways, regional learning choice programs, and French instruction. Where applicable, each of these outcome indicators are disaggregated by Indigenous and racial identities, gender identities, sexual orientation, or 2S LGBTQA+, Socioeconomic Vulnerability Index, or SVI, Individual Education Plan, or IEP status, and English Language Learner, or ELL status. We did conduct analyses by religion and found two groups that experienced some disproportionate outcomes: students who indicated that they were Christian and those who did not affiliate with a religion. With further investigation into these groups, it became apparent that there were intersecting identities such as special education designation or racial identity that better explained their outcomes. As a result, disaggregated outcomes by religion are not included in this report. This report is transparent and comprehensive. It shows persistent and pervasive disproportionate outcomes for Indigenous and African, Black, and Afro-Caribbean students. It also shows disproportionate outcomes for Latinx and Hispanic and Middle Eastern students, students who identify with a diverse gender identity, students who identify as 2S LGBTQA+, students who experience very high socioeconomic vulnerabilities, and students who receive special education services or English literacy development supports. Our next step as a research team is to ensure that the report is made widely available and that the staff understand how to interpret the data and use the information to inform their practice. We will be working closely with system departments in using these data to inform their work as they develop and implement plans to support system priorities. We are also mobilizing these data with schools. For example, over the past week, we have taken some sections of the report to school improvement and equity planning network sessions. So far, we have shown over 100 school teams how system-level data can inform their school practice, how to read and interpret the graphs, and how to use the data with an anti-oppressive data analysis framework. Throughout the school year, as we work with each stakeholder group in using these data, we will be collecting feedback that will inform the next iteration of the Equity Accountability Report Card due next fall of 2023. I submit this report to you with thanks, and I am happy to take questions.
Thank you, Researcher Hollingshead, and thank you, Superintendent Smith and AD De Silva and Director Swaroop. Are there any questions? Trustee McDonald.
Thank you very much for the report, and it's very fulsome. A lot of data in there, and a lot of information to dissect. And I think it takes a lot of reading and thinking to do that. I am wondering, is it your plan to work with communications and create like a summary of this that may be easier to review from the key takeaways of there? Because there's a lot of takeaways, but I think there's some key ones in there that we're focusing on, especially in the four groupings that you have. Is that a plan to work on something that maybe is down to a 4 to 6 page kind of document that's got the visualizations as well with it?
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, that's an excellent plan. Thank you, Trustee McDonald. We'll take that back for consideration.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks. I too found it quite compelling in terms of the work, and thank you for all of the details that you've provided. It's just sort of a general question more than anything else. Given the findings, what would you say was one finding that sort of surprised you or was concerning for you, and one that perhaps excited you, and more in terms of closing of the gap as opposed to, you know, excited because it was problematic, so to speak?
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. That's a tough question. Thank you. I think the one that surprised me was the persistent outcomes for students who are receiving English literacy development support. So students who are in the ELD program. I had not in my recent years disaggregated by that group. And so that surprised me and I think probably others. I think your other question is harder.
And that's okay. I just thought it sort of raised it more than anything. I appreciate it. Thank you. I think it's something that we can all reflect on. It's not just for you, it's sort of intended for me as well. Something that, when I saw the data, that surprised me and also sort of excited me, where gaps were being closed and in some cases where they weren't. So I think it's a general question. I don't think it just is for you, it's for our reflection as well. So really appreciate that. Thanks. All right. I'm in receipt of, for information, the report on Directive 9, the annual equity accountability report card. Moving on to item 16.1B, Directive 17, reform of the guidance program system, final report, Director Swaroop.
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. Now I'll ask Associate Director Paul De Silva to present Directive 17.
Thank you, Director Swaroop. And through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I'd like to pass this on to Superintendent Rosalind Hoppy, who is the Superintendent of Curriculum and Assessment.
Thank you, Associate Director De Silva and Director Swaroop, and through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. I would like to present this final report on Directive 17, Reform of the Guidance Program System. As can be seen through this report, several steps have been taken towards a holistic reform of the guidance program, which are outlined in the report. Examples of these steps include the Guidance Professional Learning Series, with topics being covered including culturally responsive pedagogy, critical race theory, anti-racist teaching practices, trauma-informed practices, community building ideas, and the sharing of best practices by current guidance counselors. In alignment with the ministerial review, which stated the immediate and pressing need for Black guidance counselors, particularly Black males, the board in the 2020-21, 2021-22, as well as this current school year, gave direction to secondary principals to provide all staff with an optional opportunity to indicate their staffing allocation preferences before beginning in the staffing process, allowing individuals to share if they self-identify as Black, Indigenous, racialized, or from another underserved group as part of their teaching assignment preference form. Further to this opportunity, directions were given for principals to consider staff who identify as Black, African and/or Afro-Caribbean, and Black, African and/or Afro-Caribbean male when making decisions about staffing guidance roles. I would like to highlight the success of our efforts as captured in the report. In March 2021, prior to the staffing process, in the secondary panel, there were 12 Black educators in the guidance role, and in the elementary panel, there were 6. By September 2021, there were 20 Black educators in the guidance role in the secondary panel, and 13 Black educators in the guidance role in the elementary panel. By June 2022, there were 37.6 Black guidance counselors in the secondary panel and 21.3 Black educators in the guidance role in the elementary panel. A mentorship program is being established for this fall 2022 to support new counselors in their role. Additionally, beginning in the 2022-23 school year, a regular communication will be distributed to families to inform them of scholarship and bursary opportunities that are posted on the public-facing portion of the board site. Also for this 2022-23 school year, all superintendents of education will work with principals at each of their schools to create Black Student Associations, BSAs, and Black Parent Associations, BPAs, that will become part of future BSA and BPA networks. Also, a centrally assigned guidance counselor will be hired this fall, 2022, to provide guidance services to students and parents, guardians, and caregivers who identify as African, Black, and Afro-Caribbean and are not able to access a guidance counselor at their school site. As well, this counselor will understand the lived experiences of African, Black, and Afro-Caribbean students and families. They will provide resources and supports to existing school guidance counselors to develop understanding and build capacity to better serve African, Black, and Afro-Caribbean students and families. Each of these aforementioned items reflect clear and direct alignment with the steps taken in other ministry directives. And our stated next steps demonstrate our board's commitment to the guidance reformation process to specifically address the identified inadequacies and gaps in supports and guidance for historically and currently underserved demographic groups, with particular focus on African, Black, and Afro-Caribbean students. This concludes my final report on Directive 17, Reforming the Guidance Program System, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Superintendent Hoppy, and thanks, AD De Silva. Thanks, Director Swaroop. Are there any questions? Just one from me. It was great to see the steady increase in the educators who identify as Black fill the vacancies, fill these guidance roles. Is that gap still quite wide in terms of representation based on student identification?
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. We have not completed that particular analysis, but based on the proportion that we know existed, I would say yes, it is still quite large, but I can't comment on the specific quantity of that gap. But yes, I would assume that it is still quite large. Although we've made significant progress and we're very proud of that progress, there is still much work to be done.
Thank you, appreciate that. With that, I approve the report on Directive 17, Reform of the Guidance Program System, final report. Moving on to item 16.1C, Directive 21, Revision of Policy 48, Safe and Caring Schools. Director Swaroop.
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I will now ask Associate Director Harjeet Aujla to present Directive 21.
Thank you very much, Director Swaroop. And through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I would like to introduce the board report on Directive 21, the revision of Policy 48, the Safe and Caring Schools policy. Through Directive 21, the board has reviewed and revised its student discipline policy to reflect and further prioritize restorative justice approaches as alternatives to suspensions, expulsions, and exclusions. As will be highlighted by colleagues Superintendent Michelle Stubbings and Coordinating Principal Fiona Lloyd-Henry, transforming the board's approach to student discipline necessitates several actions, which include enhancing principals, vice principals, and superintendents of education capacity to address student misconduct in supportive and corrective ways that prioritize restorative over punitive measures and embed human rights principles as they relate to children and youth. The ongoing work of Directive 21 enables the board to create the conditions, the policies, and operating procedures necessary to eliminate the disparities and disproportionalities in student discipline while enabling the board to hold itself and all of its employees accountable to that end. I will now ask Michelle Stubbings, Superintendent of Safe and Caring Schools, to please introduce the report.
Thank you, Associate Director Aujla. The Safe and Caring Schools Department is very proud to support the implementation of this new policy. As part of the implementation plan, this fall, all superintendents of education and school administrators will receive training, 3 modules of training on the policy and 4 modules of restorative justice. The restorative justice team has begun training all safe and accepting school teams on restorative justice, what it is and what it looks like in schools. We also plan to share the policy with community to increase community understanding of the policy. I'm also pleased to say that we are working on the revision of many operating procedures, including procedurally fair student investigations to support policy implementation. To provide more information about the policy, I'd like to introduce Fiona Lloyd-Henry, Coordinating Principal, Leadership, Capacity Building, and School Partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Stubbings. AD Aujla, Director Swaroop, through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. I want to thank you for highlighting the racial disparities in student discipline that necessitates this revised policy. With the revised Policy 48, Safe and Caring Schools policy, the PDSB aims to foster safe, welcoming, inclusive environments that are free from discrimination. It aims to underscore the board's commitment to eliminate the consistent racial disparities in the use of suspensions, expulsions, and other forms of exclusionary discipline. It requires principals to administer student disciplinary processes in a fair, timely, and transparent manner, use a continuum of interventions, supports, and consequences for misconduct, consider a variety of mitigating and other factors in student disciplinary processes alongside pupil age, ability, history, specifically in relation to students' experiences of racism, ableism, and other systemic barriers, and the potential impact of a suspension on the student's ongoing education. In revising the Safe and Caring Schools policy, the board engaged in an intentional and focused consultation process. Through this process, we aimed to foster meaningful partnerships, increase transparency, and build trust in the process. We also wanted to engage stakeholder voices in all stages of the policy development, including the rationale for the policy, the design, the development, how we'd monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of the policy. Through the process, we engaged with both internal and external stakeholders. We relied heavily on the work of the Directive 21 Steering Committee. We spoke with trustees, with the board's executive council, with a senior team, with ERGs, employee resource groups, Indigenous Education Advisory Committee, the Peel Indigenous Network of Employees, the Muslim Employees Association of Peel, the Peel Association of African Canadian Employees, the Keeping Students in Schools pilot project members, principals, vice principals, Parent Involvement Committee, the Special Education Advisory Committee, the Alliance Advocacy Peel, the We Rise Together Community Parent Group. We learned some things from this consultation process. We learned that we needed to have to develop and sustain meaningful efforts to ensure safe and caring schools that center student well-being. We heard of the clear need to have guidelines and roles and responsibilities for all stakeholders. We heard from our members that we need to address misconduct in a way that's consistent and fair, to underscore a central value for parental involvement in all stages of the student discipline process, to provide PD, professional development, and supports for administrators in administering discipline in ways that are fair and just. And we heard of the need to ensure transparency in the implementation, the monitoring, evaluation, and reporting of the policy. The policy is structured in four main parts that center student safety, learning and well-being, relationships, leadership and capacity building, and accountability. The board acknowledges that systemic discrimination, racism, including anti-Indigenous racism and anti-Black racism, individual and implicit bias and oppression exists within the PDSB and is entrenched within our society. The board further acknowledges that the PDSB's application of policy and procedures has not been race neutral and has negatively impacted Indigenous and Black students and parents. The board is committed to the development and application of policies, procedures, and professional learning to eliminate those realities within the board. Consistent with Section 303 of the Education Act, the board will support students who want to establish and lead activities and organizations that promote a safe and inclusive learning environment, the acceptance of and respect for others, and the creation of a positive school climate, including activities or organizations that promote gender equity, anti-racism and religious tolerance, awareness and understanding of and respect for persons with disabilities, awareness and understanding of people of all sexual orientations and gender identities, including Gender Straight Alliance student activities or organizations. The board is committed to fostering a positive learning environment so that all students can thrive, experience a sense of belonging, and achieve their full potential. The board recognizes that student learning and physical and mental well-being are premised on positive learning environments that are equitable, safe, inclusive, accepting, anti-racist, and anti-oppressive. The board will support schools in creating positive school climates where there's a raised awareness and strategies to prevent, intervene, and address inappropriate behaviors, and to build healthy relationships. There are 5 main sections under this part of the policy: to sustain work around bullying prevention and intervention, culturally responsive and relevant supports and programs for students, bias-free progressive discipline, clear school codes of conduct, and a school climate survey, which will evaluate the extent to which students experience well-being in their schools. The board requires PDSB school administrators to collaborate with parents of students involved in school disciplinary matters in a timely way and in a manner that respects the inherent dignity of each person, particularly Indigenous, Black, Afro-Caribbean, and African parents who are and who have been traditionally marginalized or excluded from many aspects of schooling. The board is committed to providing mandatory and voluntary ongoing professional learning and capacity building opportunities to all new and existing school administrators, educators, and staff so that they will understand equity, inclusion, intersecting forms of racism, oppression, colonialism, individual and systemic discrimination, harassment, power, privilege, and biases. To this end, we have written into this the revised policy 48 as demonstrated in this quotation. 5.18, mitigating and other factors. The board is committed to developing mandatory professional learning for school administrators to appropriately consider mitigating and other factors, including the student's experience of systemic barriers, including anti-Indigenous racism and anti-Black racism when assigning discipline. The board also is centering accountability and has set a number of accountability measures, which includes clear roles and responsibilities for each stakeholder, from the Board of Trustees to the Director of Education, staff, parents, students. One essential part of this new policy, the revised policy, is the expectation that principals, before making the final decision to suspend, will notify and consult with their superintendent of education before finalizing this decision. The board also will direct superintendents, principals, and vice principals to annually review and give consideration to expunging suspension and expulsion records, paper and electronic, in accordance with the relevant law, issued to students of the PDSB according to the schedule, schedule, after a year for a nonviolent incident, after 3 years for violent incidents that led to the suspension, or after 5 years for a violent incident that led to an expulsion. The board recognizes that suspension records practices disproportionately impact Black, Indigenous, 2S LGBTQI students, and that the retention of these records has disparately impacted Black and Indigenous students and students with disabilities. This completes the highlights of Directive 21. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Lloyd Henry. Thank you, Superintendent Stubbings. Thank you, AD Ajula. And thank you, Director Swaroop. Are there any questions? Once again, thank you for the comprehensive report, and happy to see consultations on operating procedures as part of the next steps. So we appreciate that as well, and we'll be looking forward to that. I approve the revised policy 48, safe and caring schools, attached as Appendix A to the report. Item 16.2, human sex trafficking prevention, update number 2, Director Swaroop.
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I will now ask Associate Director Paul De Silva to provide update number 2.
Thank you, Director Swaroop, and through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I'd like to pass this on to Coordinating Principal of Safe and Caring Schools, Alvin Au.
Thank you, Director Swaroop, Associate Director De Silva, and through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. Since the last update, the Peel District School Board Anti-Human Sex Trafficking Community Committee has taken a number of actions to further raise awareness and prevent sex trafficking in Peel schools. We have produced a cyber safety video to raise awareness amongst parents, caregivers, and families on the topic. This, along with other resources, have been shared on the board's external and internal websites to increase awareness for the entire Peel District School Board community, including the development of infographics and other tools for community outreach and identity-specific supports. Furthermore, we have shared this year's annual training plan with existing and new staff with a completion date of December 2022. As the board looks ahead to the upcoming months, we will continue to consult with stakeholder and community regarding feedback and next steps, implement feedback measures gathered to track and monitor progress on implementation, develop with community partners a process for responding to situations where a student may be engaged in the trafficking of others, including steps for safely reporting concerns, reporting to disclosures, and supporting students' immediate physical and emotional safety. In addition, we will develop with community partners the process for responding to and supporting students re-entering school and after they have been involved in a trafficking situation, including efforts to ensure that adequate safety and security needs are being met to support reintegration into school. In addition, we will provide ongoing training for staff on an annual basis to recognize the signs of human trafficking and to safely intervene if they suspect a student is being trafficked or involved in trafficking. This training will be tracked and available throughout the year to all new and existing school board employees. Furthermore, we will refine, based on school and community feedback, specific outreach and support to Indigenous, Black, African, Caribbean, Punjabi, and Sikh parents and caregivers and all groups that are disproportionately impacted by human sex trafficking to build their awareness. The Peel District School Board Anti-Human Sex Trafficking Strategy has achieved the core components of PPM 166 in its first year of implementation. As the work of the Human Sex Trafficking Prevention Strategy is established and ongoing, therefore it is recommended that the Peel Human Trafficking Service Providers Committee reports annually to the board with the next update in October 2023 on the continued progress of the Human Sex Trafficking Prevention Strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Walla. Thank you, AD De Silva, Director Swaroop. Are there any questions about this report? Once again, seeing none, thank you for the comprehensive report again. And I know it's both difficult and important work, so we appreciate it. I'm in receipt of the Human Sex Trafficking Prevention Update number 2 and resolve that the Peel Human Trafficking Service Providers Committee report annually to the board with an update on the continued progress of the Human Sex Trafficking Prevention Strategy. Item 16.3, Trustee Code of Conduct, Director Swaroop.
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I will now ask General Counsel Catherine Lockyer to present the Trustee Code of Conduct.
Thank you, Director Swaroop, and through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. In April 2018, Ontario Regulation 246/18 was passed, requiring every school board to have a code of conduct for trustees and for it to be in place before May 2023 and for it to be reviewed at least every 4 years. A trustee code of conduct establishes governing principles and standards for acceptable and respectable behaviors and provides a framework for professional conduct and responsibilities. A code demonstrates how trustees have determined to regulate themselves. The Ontario Public School Boards Association Trustee Code of Conduct template was used as a guide in drafting the draft code of conduct as attached to the report. The draft code was reviewed by external legal counsel, the provincially appointed parliamentarian, and in consultation with the Integrity Commissioner. The draft code was presented at the Governance and Policy Committee in September. Comments made at the committee meeting were considered and taken into account in the draft that is now before the board. Subsequent to the committee meeting, an updated draft was provided to all trustees for further comment. We did receive some comments, and those comments were also considered and taken into account in the draft code attached. To show the changes from the committee to the current draft, we have attached both a red-lined version and a clean version for your ease of reference. The draft code addresses principles of integrity and dignity of the office, respect for confidentiality, upholding decisions, supply chain ethics, gifts, benefit and hospitality, use of board property, services and other resources, improper use of influence, conduct regarding current and prospective employment, discreditable conduct, reprisals and obstruction, and acting on the advice of the Integrity Commissioner. The code consists of 3 parts: the actual principles and directions, the complaint protocol, and the method of retaining the Integrity Commissioner. The complaint protocol provides for the use of an informal procedure first, as the code contemplates remediation that may positively correct inappropriate behavior. The formal complaint process is to be used for more egregious or repetitive behaviors that disrupt the ability of the board to conduct business. The code is for use by trustees and is not a code accessible by staff or the community at this time. The code provides that an alleged breach is brought to the attention of the board, and then the Integrity Commissioner shall make inquiries into the matter. The Integrity Commissioner shall report to the board with a recommendation, and then the board will determine whether a member has breached the code. The Integrity Commissioner will report annually to the board on their activities around the code. The Code of Conduct will be effective on the first day of the new term of office on November 15th. At the inaugural meeting, each trustee will be required to sign a declaration or an acknowledgement about receipt of a copy of the code and a commitment of adherence to it. I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you, General Counsel Lockyer. Thank you, Director Swaroop. Are there any questions? Trustee McDonald.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Catherine, for doing this and taking the comments, that in place. I know I had questions around the social media, and I see some great changes around there. So I've been watching the news and following the news, and I'm noticing different ways to how to deal with when a complaint is brought through the Code of Conduct. I think the Halton Catholic, the trustees meet in private or in camera and have that discussion and then come out with the vote, but don't have any details about it. And I think the Toronto Catholic is a similar process. So in our process, we bring it in the public board meeting. So what is the consensus on this? Am I just confused that it can be done either way, or is it?
The regulation did not provide guidance in whether it should be in camera or in public. After a review not only of school boards, but of other agencies such as municipalities that have codes of conduct, it is common practice for it to be done in public. The Integrity Commissioner was quite adamant that it be an in public process as opposed to a closed process. Remembering that the investigation itself is done by the Integrity Commissioner, and it's only when they feel that there is a report necessary for the board to make a decision in around the actual behavior under the code that it would come to the board in the first place. Otherwise, it could be dealt with through remediation or other possibilities through the investigation.
Great. Thank you very much for that clarification. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Any other questions? Is that an old hand, Trustee McDonald? Is there another hand up there? You took it off. Okay. Wonderful. Thanks for all of the work on this, legal counsel. And with that, I approve the Trustee Code of Conduct as attached as Appendix A. Moving on to item number 17, 17.1, a motion regarding term limits for school board trustees. Trustee Davies.
Do I read the motion? Is that, or speak to it?
I could read it and then you could speak to it.
Okay, thank you.
Notice of motion for consideration. Whereas the board values enhanced community engagement, and whereas the board is committed to diversity and inclusion, and whereas education is a constantly evolving field which benefits from regular infusions of new and fresh ideas, and whereas notwithstanding the arduous process to secure political office, trustees should not view themselves as lifetime politicians. Therefore, be it resolved that a letter be written to the Premier of Ontario to request necessary changes in legislation to permit and implement term limits for the position of school board trustee, such that beginning with the 2022 municipal election term, trustees of the Peel District School Board be limited to a maximum of 5 terms in office. Trustee Davies.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Rodriguez. I've just noticed through this political process, and this is my first term, that candidates meetings and all the passion seems to come from parents of students in our school system. And it became very apparent to me through this last election process that it's the parents of the students that really should be running this board, and they need more voice at this board. And I've just noticed that I myself, if I were to go 2 or 3 more terms, the memory of having a student in this board will probably be a distant memory to me. And I also liken it to other boards that I've sat on, in that, you know, the product, like let's use the example of Coca-Cola. If Coca-Cola had a board and, you know, 90% of them had never consumed a Coca-Cola product or hadn't consumed one in the last 15 years, how could they make decisions that can empathize with the consumers of that product? And that's why this is very passionate to me that, you know, we need to change, we need to evolve. And so that's why I put this motion forward.
Thank you, Trustee Davies. Comments, trustees? Trustee Cameron.
Thank you. Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. If I were voting, I would not support this. This is a motion that limits, is very limited in its scope only to the Peel District School Board. There are 72 boards in this province. This is frankly difficult for me to get my head around. And it's not that I'm looking for 5 terms of service for myself. I don't think you have to, just to use Trustee Davies' analogy, but I don't think you have to smoke to work for one of the tobacco companies. You know, I think in this position, you have to have the heart to represent your community and have the empathy to focus on student success every single day. I wouldn't support this, and I think it would be slightly embarrassing to send it to the minister to ask them to do this just for our board. And I strongly believe, Supervisor, that let the electorate decide when your term is no longer welcome as their representative. But I appreciate that, Supervisor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Trustee Cameron. Other comments?
Supervisor Rodriguez, I cannot raise my hand. I'm on the phone, but if you would allow me to comment, please.
Yeah, go ahead, Trustee Green.
Okay, thank you. So I am much in line with Trustee Cameron. If I had to vote on this, I would vote against it. This politics is a democratic process. And when we start dictating how our community decide on the democratic process, I think we are creating barriers and setting up roadblocks for those that want to come along and those who are willing to serve. When you look at the number of boards across the province that are involved, you know, that make up the Ontario School Board Association, they would have something to say. And I can tell you, sitting at that level, nobody would support this. Nobody would vote for this. I think this. I have nothing against my colleague motion and want to put a motion, but I don't think that this is well thought out. I don't think this this motion basically would represent what I can speak from sitting at the Ontario School Board Association, would represent all boards, because this would be specific to one board, and I will not single out the board that I love and cherish so much. So I would not in any way support in this. I think it's a bad idea, send the wrong message, and we're talking about removing systematic barriers. Doing this would create that. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Green. Trustee Benjamin?
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I too agree with my trustee colleagues that the term of office should not be limited for trustees, because this has been decided by the Municipal Election Act, and it is the trustees are elected or re-elected after every term because of their record and because of the support that they have from the community. I feel that using the term career politician also does not apply to a trustee, because when you decide to become a trustee, it's because of your passion for education, it's because of your connections with the field of education. And me personally, it was because of my career in education that I came into this. I feel that this being used as a springboard, because of your experience as a trustee, maybe you may decide to go into politics, but there is no politics in a trustee's role. And I would like to say that on that grounds, I would not support this motion.
Thank you, Trustee Benjamin. Any other comments? Trustee Lawton.
Thank you. Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I support this motion. Not because this is my last meeting. I have served 3 terms, and I believe strongly in term limits. I'm not sure whether 5 years or 5 terms is the right amount of time, but I do believe in term limits, and I think that it's important that we offer entrance into what is a very important governing role for our students, for our families. And I think it's fairly clear that incumbency is difficult to get around, especially when you haven't been involved closely in the school board or the school board policies. So I would, if we were to vote, I would support this motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Trustee Lawton. Other comments? All right, seeing none and seeing the discrepancy, I'm going to just leave it tabled, Trustee Davies, at this time, let the new board decide and allow it to come back, so to speak, if it does. Appreciate the conversation. I'm not going to be sending a letter at this time to the Premier or anything else. It might need to be thought out, as Trustee Cameron said, if it was to go forward, perhaps more specifically as to how it kind of applies to provincially as opposed to Peel on its own. So appreciate those comments, Trustee Cameron, and we'll leave the motion tabled. Moving forward, item 18, there are no other notices of motion this evening. And having no further business this evening, I now adjourn the meeting of the board for October 19th, 2022. Have a pleasant rest of the evening, and it was certainly good to see some of you in person. Take good care.